Campfire Classics is a classic literature podcast. However, your hosts will occasionally use not-so-classy language and immature humor to describe very mature situations. As such, listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Ken Sandberg.
And I'm Heather Michelle Lawler.
Welcome back to Campfire Classics, where we try to read those books that look really good on your shelf.
We're back. 2 weeks in a row.
I know. It's wild. It's almost like we do this or something.
It's like this is a thing that we used to do every week.
Yeah.
It's just been a while.
It's just, we kind of got out of the habit. But welcome back. Thanks for joining us, listeners. Welcome back. I suppose welcome to the statistically 0.01 of you listening to this episode. That
for the first time.
Is listening for the first time.
Yeah.
You're in for something.
You're in for a treat, because every episode's a treat.
I like treats.
Yeah. Like Easter was this past weekend. Lots of good treats. We did our deviled eggs and bacon
and
so
good.
Sparkly and the doctor. That's our Easter tradition, at least.
Yeah, and
because it started with he is risen. We were like, what about if he is resurrected?
He is re-risen. He is regenerated.
Regenerated?
Regenerated. He's become gentrified.
Ooh, let's not do that.
He's become gentlemaned.
He's become gentlemaned or
genteeled.
Ladied. He'd become ladied or genteeled or genderless. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, Lina got her treat as well. Mm-hmm. She stole bacon off the tray.
In front of us.
Adorable.
It wasn't like she was hiding it. We were both sitting on the couch, and I got a video of her quite literally pulling a piece of bacon into her mouth. Because she is a bacon whore.
Cats like bacon. That's the lesson I learned.
Lina also likes croissants, though. She's weird.
She's an odd one. Yeah.
She's really weird.
Not so unusual. She likes ice cream.
Yeah, whenever we have our well, actually, technically, that's Greek yogurt.
Frozen Greek yogurt.
Yeah.
She's very finicky. She has refined tastes.
Yes, she's watching her figure. She wants the protein. she likes her high protein foods and croissants.
Which are not high protein, but goddamn,
they're delicious.
I was at sitting at Fight Call the other day before show. I'm working on a production of the Scottish play. For those of you who may or may not know, I was sitting at Fight Call, and I'd stopped by the coffee shop down the street, and I was like drinking my coffee and eating a croissant while I was watching people swing swords at each other. My job's cool. And our ASM came up to me and was like, Ken, what are you eating? I was like, it's a croissant. And she was like, is that just a plain croissant? And I was like, yeah. And she was like there's no chocolate or jam or anything. I was like, yeah. And you didn't put butter on it. You're just eating a croissant. And I was like, yeah, it's delicious. And she went, you're fucking wild.
Hello. A good, correct butter croissant, just like the traditional croissant. You don't need shit on it, y'all.
Doesn't need anything else.
Anything. It's perfect as it is. Now, I am all for making like croissant sandwiches and like putting some fresh jam. Like, I'm all for toppings, but if it is a really good butter croissant like the ones Mighty Bread makes here in Philly, then you don't need anything on it. It is freaking delicious, just as it is.
Yep.
And now my mouth is watering.
We'll be getting croissants soon here at Campfire Classics.
Yummy.
Campfire Classics, fueled by coffee and croissants.
Not untrue, honestly.
Yeah, I'm 2 big-ass coffees in on the day.
I'm in the middle of my second coffee, and there will be no croissants today, but...
No, it's probably too late to pick up the fresh ones, but tomorrow. We'll get croissants tomorrow. It'll be good. Dear listener, by the time you are listening to this episode, we will be consuming croissants. So bear that in mind.
By tomorrow morning?
Well, okay.
Don't promise me things you can't give me.
Well, I mean, unless, probably not if you're listening to this at 8 o'clock in the morning when it drops.
Yes, we have now switched our drop day to Wednesday.
Wednesdays at 8 a.m.
We just Mondays is usually our mutual day off, so it was difficult to. Usually that was the only day we could both do something, so we were like, we have to record. Ken has to edit. I have to do the visual stuff. Like it's all too much in one day, so we were like, let's just drop on Wednesday, so we have all day Tuesday. Either Monday if we're not in the mood to like work, if we want to take a full day off, we can. And then Tuesday we have to like get everything together.
Yeah. The big thing is if we record on Monday evening, it means I have Tuesday to edit instead of recording on Monday evening and then being up until 1 in the morning on Tuesday trying to.
So it gives us a true day off, which we are allowed.
Yeah. Rest days are important.
Yeah, even though you had a callback yesterday, so
So it was
you had a day,
a well-used rest
day. A well-used day. Yes.
Yeah, rest days like croissants do not need anything more if it's a good one.
Well, mine included lots of Lost and research on our wedding, which we're working on planning right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But
a lot of it was on the couch in my comfy PJs.
Yeah, it didn't need bells and whistles. Although occasionally extra toppings like going for a hike, playing a game, those are great.
Yeah.
And like a good episode of Campfire Classics.
Wow.
It does not need any extra bells and whistles. It can just be what it is. And
what do we do?
What that is, for those of you...
Wow, that was a segue. I liked that.
Am I good at this game or what?
That was good.
For those of you who are either new to the podcast or haven't listened in so fucking long that you've forgotten, here we read short stories to you, sight unseen. We cold read them after having pulled them out of the obscurity of public domain. While we read them, we laugh at jokes and we cry at moments of great tragedy, and we generally make fun of things that today we would consider to be juvenile toilet humor. Yes.
I like juvenile toilet humor.
Yes, this is like what is this? This is like 10th grade English lit for people who really like dick and fart jokes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, 10th grade. Yeah, that's about right. Maybe like AP lit. Some of the stories.
Yeah,
some
fair
of them,
enough.
But, like...
Some of us were in the AP English lit back in 10th grade.
Oh, in 10th grade?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to take AP classes until 11th and 12th grade where we were.
Yeah. No, well, I suppose I don't remember if it was technically... There was the like... The classes where you were on the trajectory to be AP.
Yeah, it's like...
That
like
might
pre-med.
be what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
I was pre-AP. Basically, it was all the kids who got the shit kicked out of them got to be in this class.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I took I took English honors.
That might be what it was.
I took English 10 honors, which was most of the AP kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that was Mrs.
Van Zanti, who's still a Facebook friend of mine, and I will say I'm going to shout out to her right now. That bitch pushed me hard because I was lazy as fuck in high school because I was smart my whole life. And then I discovered theater and went, well, I already know I'm smart, so I'm just going to focus on this. So I was lazy as fuck. And she pushed me hard, and I appreciate her. But she also always supported what I did. She was like, it's good that you know what you want to do. That's a good thing. But you can learn more, and that will make you a better artist. It took me about 10 more years for that to sink in. And then I went back to college. But yeah. So shout out to Mrs. Van Zanti at West High School. She was the shit.
Teachers are really important.
Tough love is important from a teacher sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it doesn't sink in for years. Yeah.
Sometimes those lessons come back and you're like, oh my God, 6th grade. I get it now.
Yeah, really. It was absolutely. But anyway, we got off track again. But yes, these are good stories. And today I get to pick a story for Kenneth.
Holy crap, I get to read.
You get to read.
I love it. But as is usually the case, before we jump into the story, we're going to get some fun facts to either tell us something about the author or set the mood or just generally be fun.
So I have chosen a story today by someone we have read twice.
Okay.
So the fun facts will work around that. So we are going to revisit our good friend, Ambrose Bierce.
Nice.
Our first episode of his was episode 12 of this podcast.
Right. That was
where we read Occurrence
at Elk Creek. Bridge, yeah.
And that episode's called "Here Comes the Boom Boom."
Yeah,
And then
that was a good one.
Yes,
That's a great story.
It's a really good. It's one of his most famous stories. And then the other story we read by him was called "Beyond the Wall," and the episode title was "What Happens in the Locker Room."
Yes.
Yeah, and that is episode 67. So if you want to learn more about, specifically in episode 12, if you want to learn about Ambrose Bierce's like general bio, go listen to episode 12. Also, it's a great story, so just listen to that. And if you want to learn a little bit more about him, episode 67, but I'm going to connect the pieces of those two episodes right here.
Okay.
So I don't know if you remember how much you remember about Mr. Bierce, but one of the most famous things about Mr. Bierce is he was born on June 24th, 1842, and he died, nobody knows.
Right. He's a vampire.
He disappeared.
Yeah.
Yes. So he just up and disappeared, and no one knows when, where, how, if he died. So what I talked about,
he was like over like fighting during the Mexican Revolution or some shit, right?
Yes.
And just nobody saw him ever again.
So he, so what I'm going to talk about is the theories of his disappearance today. So what I talked about on the original episode 12, was his bio, and then just that he disappeared. In episode 67, I talked about other famous authors who have up and disappeared for periods of time or just never were seen again. So now I'm going to talk about Mr. Bierce's disappearance and all the theories that go along with it. So to catch you up, is what happened to Ambrose? To this very day, no one knows for sure, but there are a lot of interesting theories. So on October 1913, a 71-year-old Bierce, who was at that time considered one of the most influential journalists and writers in the country, embarked on a tour of his old Civil War battlefields. So he made his way south and then went west and crossed into Mexico. Now, Mexico at the time was in a 3-year-long decade revolution. So he joined up to observe.
Wait, so that 3-year-long decade revolution?
Into 3 years.
3 years into a decade-long revolution.
Yeah, it was. They were in the midst of a
10-year
war.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So he joined up with Pancho Villa's army to observe and write, because a lot of his writings were about the Civil War, and he goes, okay, now I can observe this other war and get some information out of it.
And he's 71.
71.
Jeebus.
When he left on the journey.
Yeah.
So we don't know how old he is when he went right in there. So he witnessed the Battle of Terra Blanca before accompanying Villa's army as far as to the city, which I'm going to butcher right now, Chihuahua. I should look that up. Look up how to pronounce this. Oh, Chihuahua. It's Chihuahua.
Oh, it's where the dogs come from.
Yeah. It doesn't. That is what Chihuahua is spelled like. It's funny. Yeah, Chihuahua. So the city of Chihuahua.
Yes.
All right. So he shows up at the city of Tiny Dog Syndrome and
Yappy Dog City.
Yappy Dog City. So far.
Oh God, the worst place I can think of to spend the last few days of my life.
Well, we don't know if they were, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the last known journey that people say he took. Then he vanished without a trace, never to be seen or heard from again. So that is where we are. Theory 1, he committed suicide.
He was surrounded by all the yappy dogs.
Yeah, exactly. So Bierce had actually had a pretty rough decade leading up to this journey he went on. So both of his sons died. His wife and him divorced, and then she died a year later. He had also suffered from lifelong asthma and had a traumatic brain injury from the Civil War. So he had a lot of health issues as well.
Oof.
And so some believe that in the whole reality, Bierce actually just wandered into the Grand Canyon to end it all on his own accord. So the last known communication with the world was a letter he wrote and supposedly mailed from Chihuahua City to a close friend dated December 26, 1913. And it closes with the ominous words, "As to me, I leave here tomorrow for an unknown destination." Okay.
All right.
So there's that. Then there is theory number 2. He was executed by Pancho Villa's firing squad. So because he's an outsider, right? So
Right.
for many years, James Leonard was a retired American priest serving in Mexico, and he claims that Bierce was executed on the orders of Pancho Villa and buried in a small desert town. So Leinert, this priest, even paid for a gravestone to be installed in Sierra Moyada, the Sierra Moyada Cemetery, where he presumes Bierce remains still lie. And the gravestone reads, "Very trustworthy witnesses suppose that here lie the remains of Ambrose Bierce." And that has him dying in 1914.
Okay.
Famous American writer, journalist. He was executed on suspicion of being a spy, is what the gravestone says.
So Pancho Villa suspected that he was spying for the other side.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So if this was the fate of Bierce, then it was like he must have been prepared, because he actually wrote a letter to his niece Laura and sent it from Mexico. And Bierce wrote, quote, "Goodbye. If you hear of me being stood up against a Mexican stone wall and shot to rags, please know that I think that a pretty good way to depart this life. It beats old age, disease, or falling down the cellar stairs." So,
All right. So he's written 2 letters now. He wrote one to his niece saying, "I might get executed," and one to his buddy saying, "I don't know what's happening,
I'm
but
gonna
I'm
wander
leaving
into the
soon."
world on a journey. Yeah. So then, theory number 3, he was killed by Mexican federal forces. So an American soldier named Tex O'Reilly, which is the most American fucking name I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
Advances this theory that Bierce was killed before he ever got to the villa, to what's their names? To Pancho Villa's army. So
Okay.
he has a theory that he was killed before he even got to them. So like on his way to them. O'Reilly maintains that Bierce was shot dead by Mexican federal fighters while drinking at a cantina in a mining camp called Sierra Mojada, which is where the priest says he's buried. But the priest says he was killed by
Pancho Villa. And
This guy says he
saying,
never met Pancho Villa.
This guy is saying he was shot by the other side.
And they assumed he was a spy since he spoke no Spanish, and so even if they were interrogating him, he would have no way to say, no, I'm not. I'm a writer. So O'Reilly wrote in his autobiography that shortly after the shooting, he was taken to a house where the dead American had been staying and was personally asked by the owner, and he personally asked the owner if anything had been left behind. And according to O'Reilly, quote, "The old fellow reached up behind a rafter on the wall and brought out 2 old empty envelopes left by the Americano, and they were both addressed to Ambrose Bierce." So he had been staying there at some point, and there were 2 letters left.
Okay.
Theory number 4. He died of pneumonia on his way back to the United States. So a hitchhiker, unnamed, told the story of picking up the old gringo who appeared quite sick and called himself Ambrosia. He paid the man and his friends to help him get back to the U.S., and during the trip he talked about the many books he had written throughout his life, one with the word devil in the title. But Ambrosia didn't survive and instead died of pneumonia on January 17th, 1914. His body buried in an unmarked grave in Marfa, Texas. So it is possible that this hitchhiker that picked up a man named Ambrosia actually picked up Ambrose Bierce.
Okay.
And theory number 5, he is absolutely still alive, wandering the world as some sort of like 150-year-old like vampire or something. And yeah, so to this day, nobody knows. It's a super fun mystery. Those are the 5 main theories I could find online. That was according to Wikipedia and a bunch of other sources that I found. But it's kind of fun. It's wild that nobody knows what happened to this guy, and because he was so prolific, and so like, and was not like a person who didn't know how to travel. I mean, he'd been traveling his whole life in the wars and stuff. So, well, we may never know.
So he
He committed suicide. So he took his own life.
He was executed by Pancho Villa. He was executed by the Mexican government.
So the opposite side, because the Pancho Villa was in the revolution side. Right. Yeah, so.
He died of pneumonia. So we have 4 accounts of his death.
Yes.
And this is like 1913, 1914?
They're all between 1913 and 1914.
Okay. And just a couple of years later, we have Rasputin, who dies, I think, 1916, and they have to try to kill him like 7 times. So I think the beginning of the 20th century was just we have these famous vampires popping up. I think that's what's immortals.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
I'm
all
the
for
quickening.
It. I love it. But all that aside, we'll never know. But that is your fun mystery on top of mysteries.
All right.
Since this whole thing was started by Agatha Christie readings, I figure a little mystery fun facts.
Yeah, who as I'm
also
sure we
noted.
Noted.
Yes, I did note
in
that
episode
in the last
67 or whatever it was.
Yes. That she famously disappeared for a while. But today you are going to be reading a story entitled "The Middle Toe of the Right Foot" by Ambrose Bierce.
Alrighty,
let's start
this fire. The Middle Toe of the Right Foot by Ambrose Bierce.
That's right. It's my favorite toe.
The Middle Toe of the Right Foot and Other Unknown Erogenous Zones by Ambrose Bierce.
Well, we were watching a show last night where some guy was selling feet pictures to try and make some money. So, maybe I'm sure there are people out there that the middle toe of the right foot is absolutely the one that brings them to climax.
Hey, and that's awesome. I'm glad there is something out there for everybody.
It's true. Live your life.
It is well known that the old Manton house is haunted.
Yeah.
In all the rural district near about, and even in the town of Marshall, a mile away, not one person of unbiased mind entertains a doubt of it. Incredulity is confined to those opinionated persons who will be called cranks as soon as the useful word shall have penetrated the intellectual demise.
I'm looking that word up. Domain. Land attached to a manor and retained for the owner's use.
Huh.
Possession of real property in one's own right.
All right.
A law.
Domain.
Yeah.
So that's DEMESNE. Domain.
Yeah.
For those of you playing Teach Me Things at home.
Yay. We like Teach Me Things at home.
Incredulity is confined to those opinionated persons who will be called cranks as soon as the useful word shall have penetrated the intellectual domain of the martial advance. The evidence that the house is haunted is of 2 kinds. The testimony of disinterested witnesses who have had ocular proof, and that of the house itself.
I like that we've said that the people that don't believe it's haunted are called cranks.
Yep.
They're like, you old cranky bitch.
Yeah. If you don't believe that it's haunted, it's either because you haven't heard of it or you're just kind of a dick.
Yeah.
The former may be disregarded and ruled out on any of the various grounds of objection which may be urged against it by the ingenious, but facts within the observation of all are material and controlling. In the first place, the Manton house has been unoccupied by mortals for more than 10 years.
See, he's telling us that he's going to become a vampire and move into the Manton house. Maybe this will answer the question. Where is Ambrose Bierce? It is occupied by...
He's living in Marshall at the Manton house.
At the Manton house, because it's not occupied by mortals.
And with its outbuildings is slowly falling into decay. a circumstance which in itself the judicious will hardly venture to ignore. It stands a little way off the loneliest reach of the Marshall and Harriston Road, in an opening which was once a farm and is still disfigured with strips of rotting fence and half covered with brambles overrunning a stony and sterile soil long unacquainted with the plow.
Sounds like a good witch house, too.
I mean, witch house, haunted house.
Yeah,
they live in the same realm.
It's the town spooky house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The house itself is in tolerably good condition, though badly weather-stained and in dire need of attention from the glazier, the smaller male population of the region having attested in the manner of its kind its disapproval of dwelling without dwellers. It is 2 stories in height, nearly square, its front pierced by a single doorway flanked on each side by a window boarded up to the very top. Corresponding windows above, not protected, serve to admit light and rain to the rooms of the upper floor.
Also where people can see people walking around.
I'm sure we're getting somewhere into that. Yeah. Grass and weeds grow pretty rankly all about, and a few shade trees, somewhat the worse for wind and leaning all in one direction, seem to be making a concerted effort to run away.
Oh shit, even the trees don't want to be there.
In short, as the Marshalltown humorist explained in the columns of the Advance, the proposition that the Manton house is badly haunted is the only logical conclusion from the premises.
I mean, that's good journalism right there.
Yep. And I always take my facts from the local comedian.
Of course, the local humorist is exactly, well, I mean...
It's just The Daily Show.
I mean, I was going to say, I seriously watch The Daily Show and The Colbert Tonight Show for those purposes.
Yep.
And I do. I take my facts from them. Ha-ha!
The fact that in this dwelling, Mr. Manton thought it expedient one night some 10 years ago to rise and cut the throats of his wife and 2 small children, removing at once to another part of the country, has no doubt done its share in directing public attention to the fitness of the place for supernatural phenomena.
Whoa, okay. So it's a murder house.
Yes.
Okay, well, there we go.
It's a triple homicide house.
It's a triple homicide murder house, yeah. Like, oh, shit.
And then he didn't even have the good sense to make it a murder-suicide house.
Yeah.
He was like, dead.
Bye!
Peace, bitches.
So I wonder if he's still alive, because I guess we might not find out. But, yeah. So, yeah, there's been some trauma in the house. Okay, now, you know what? The humorist is onto something.
Yep. To this house one summer evening came 4 men in a wagon. 3 of them promptly alighted, and the one who had been driving hitched the team to the only remaining post of what had been a fence. The 4th remained seated in the wagon. "Come," said one of his companions, approaching him while the others moved away in the direction of the dwelling. "This is the place."
They're all like, just kidding, I don't want to do this.
The man addressed did not move. "By God," he said harshly, "this is a trick, and it looks to me as if you were in it." "Perhaps I am," the other said, looking him straight in the face and speaking in a tone that had some of contempt in it. "You will remember, however, that the choice of place was with your own assent left to the other side. Of course, if you are afraid of spooks..." "I am afraid of nothing," the man interrupted with another oath.
Masculine, rah. Something tells me this ain't gonna end well.
And sprang to the ground, as if to show just how unafraid he was.
Yep.
"My penis is huge."
My butt is not clenched at all in fear.
The two then joined the others at the door, which one of them had already opened with some difficulty caused by rust of lock and hinge. All entered. Inside, it was dark, but the man who had unlocked the door produced a candle and matches and made a light. He then unlocked a door on the right as they stood in the passage. This gave them entrance to a large square room that the candle but dimly lighted. The floor had a thick carpeting of dust, which partly muffled their footfalls. Cobwebs were in the angles of the walls and depended from the ceiling like strips of rotting lace making undulatory movements in the disturbed air.
Ooh.
The room had 2 windows in adjoining sides, but from neither could anything be seen except the rough inner surfaces of boards a few inches from the glass. There was no fireplace, no furniture. There was nothing besides the cobwebs and the dust. The 4 men were the only objects there which were not part of the structure.
Yicky. Yicky, yicky. That's some good writing to put us in the yicky mood.
I really enjoy that as soon as they got into the house, I was suddenly like, and now this is like, I can tell not only because it feels different, but also because I'm looking at the little lines blip up and down on the recording, that my voice got much more subdued.
Got quiet, like you're in the house. Well, and that's good writing right there.
Yeah.
Because the tone of the writing even changed.
Also, I don't always toot my own horn, but without a hiccup, I read the word undulatory.
You did. I saw that. I watched it happen, and I'm very proud of you.
Strange enough, they looked in the yellow light of the candle. The one who had so reluctantly alighted was especially spectacular. He might have been called sensational. He was of middle age, probably the right side of 40.
Fuck off. He's on the correct side of 40, y'all. If you want to know more about that, check out last week's episode.
He was of middle age, heavily built, deep-chested, and broad-shouldered. Looking at his figure, one would have said that he had a giant's strength. At his features, that he would use it like a giant. He was clean-shaven, his hair rather closely cropped and gray. His low forehead was seamed with wrinkles above the eyes, and over the nose, these became vertical.
So he's got wrinkles.
Yeah, you got.
'Cause he's on the right side of 40.
Yeah. We all get them eventually. Some of us have had them since 15. The heavy black brows followed the same law, saved from meeting only by an upward turn that would otherwise have been the point of contact. So he almost has a unibrow.
That's the fanciest way anyone's ever said unibrow ever.
Deeply sunken beneath these glowed in the obscure light a pair of eyes of uncertain color, but obviously enough too small. There was something forbidding in their expression which was not bettered by the cruel mouth and wide jaw. The nose was well enough, as noses go. One does not expect much of noses.
And that's all I have to say about that.
All that was sinister in the man's face seemed accentuated by an unnatural pallor. He appeared altogether bloodless.
So he's either a vampire or he's the guy that murdered his family.
Well, I was going to say, what do we think the odds are that this is Mr. Manton?
Yeah, it's either Mr. Manton or some sort of supernatural creature.
The appearance of the other men was sufficiently commonplace. They were such persons as one meets and forgets that he met. All were younger than the man described, between whom the eldest of the others who stood apart, there was apparently no kindly feeling. They avoided looking at each other. Gentlemen, said the man holding the candle and keys, I believe everything is right. Are you ready, Mr. Rosser? The man standing apart from the group bowed and smiled. And you, Mr. Grossmith? The heavy man bowed and scowled. You'll be pleased to remove your outer clothing.
Oh, it's an orgy party.
And we're taking it one step at a time. First, just the outer clothing, and then we'll move into the spookier rooms.
Well, and then we get to the feet, apparently,
at
some point. So it's a kink fetish orgy party at the haunted house for closeted gay men.
We're just going to wait and see how naked everyone has to get before the ghosts show up.
The ghosts like naked people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or they don't.
And that's why they show up.
And that's why they show up.
They're like, how inappropriate.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's find out.
Their hats, coats, waistcoats, and neckwear were soon removed and thrown outside the door in the passage. The man with the candle now nodded, and the fourth man, he who had urged Grossmith to leave the wagon, produced from the pocket of his overcoat 2 long, murderous-looking bowie knives, which he drew now from their leather scabbards.
Oh, my.
They are exactly alike, he said, presenting one to each of the 2 principals, for by this time the dullest observer would have understood the nature of this meeting. It was to be a duel to the death.
Oh, shit. What? Who goes to the murder house to have a duel? I mean, I guess there's already bad energy there, so you might as well just leave it there.
May as well, yeah. If you're gonna create nasty energy somewhere, it may as well be someplace where the ghosts already hate you.
I guess. Okay, all right. So we got to duel on our hands.
Each combatant took a knife, examined it critically near the candle, and tested the strength of the blade and handle across his lifted knee. Their persons were then searched in turn, each by the second of the other.
It's got like a fucking Hamilton duel happening here.
If it is agreeable to you, Mr. Grossmith, said the man holding the light, you will place yourself in that corner. He indicated the angle of the room farthest from the door, whither Grossmith retired, his second parting from him with a grasp of the hand which had nothing of cordiality in it. In the angle nearest the door, Mr. Rosser stationed himself, and after a whispered consultation, his second left him, joining the other near the door. At that moment, the candle was suddenly extinguished, leaving all in profound darkness.
Wait, what? They're going to do this in the dark?
This may have been done by a draft from the open door. Whatever the cause, the effect was startling.
Ooh, the ghosts don't like it. We got multi-level weird going on. We got a haunted house, we got a murder house, and we got a duel going on.
Yeah, and we got trees that are trying to run the fuck away.
Trees that don't want to be there. So, what?
Gentlemen, said a voice which sounded strangely unfamiliar in the altered condition affecting the relations of the senses. Gentlemen, you will not move until you hear the closing of the outer door. A sound of trampling ensued, then the closing of the inner door, and finally the outer one closed with a concussion which shook the entire building. A few minutes afterward, a belated farmer's boy met a light wagon which was being driven furiously toward the town of Marshall. He declared that behind the 2 figures on the front seat stood a third, with its hands upon the bowed shoulders of the others, who appeared to struggle vainly to free themselves from its grasp. This figure, unlike the others, was clad in white and had undoubtedly boarded the wagon as it passed the haunted house. As the lad could boast a considerable former experience with the supernatural thereabouts, his word had the weight justly due to the testimony of an expert. The story, in connection with the next day's events, eventually appeared in the Advance with some slight literary embellishments and a concluding intimation that the gentleman referred to would be allowed to use the paper's columns for their version of the night's adventure. But the privilege remained without a claimant.
What the fuck just happened? Spooky house.
Yeah, so they set up for the duel.
Yeah.
The candle went out.
But the presumably still closed
presumably
the door.
The guy who had lit the candle then said, in a voice that sounded weird,
yeah,
gentlemen, don't move until you hear both doors close.
So we're out of the house.
And then, presumably the 2 seconds, were spotted on the wagon headed in toward town with a mysterious third person.
All in white.
All in white, like gripping their shoulders.
Yuck. All right.
So that's where we are.
And that was section 1. Or
yes.
Chapter 1 of the short story.
Moving on.
Chapter 2. Two. Moving on to 2.
The events that led up to this duel in the tutu.
As long as it's not a duel in the doo-doo, we're good.
The doo-doo. The events that led up to this duel in the dark were simple enough. One evening, 3 young men of the town of Marshall were sitting in a quiet corner of the porch of the village hotel, smoking and discussing such matters as 3 educated young men of a southern village would naturally find interesting. Their names were King, Sancher, and Rosser. At a little distance, within easy hearing, but taking no part in the conversation, sat a fourth. He was a stranger to the others. They merely knew that on his arrival by stagecoach that afternoon, he had written in the hotel register the name of Robert Grossmith. He had not been observed to speak to anyone except the hotel clerk. He seemed indeed singularly fond of his own company, or, as the personnel of the Advance expressed it, grossly addicted to evil associations.
Whoa. So he liked to hang out by himself turned into he clearly talks to the devil.
Just because you're an introvert does not mean you're a warlock. But then it should be said, in justice to the stranger, that the personnel was himself of a too convivial disposition fairly to judge one differently gifted, and had moreover experienced a slight rebuff in an effort at an interview. Okay.
Yeah.
So the guy who wrote that review was
like, okay, maybe
a happy-go-lucky extrovert who felt like he'd been slighted by this guy.
Yeah.
I hate any kind of deformity in a woman, said King, whether natural or acquired. I have a theory that any physical defect has its correlative mental and moral defect.
Well, ain't he a catch?
I infer, then, said Rosser gravely, that a lady lacking the moral advantage of a nose would find the struggle to become Mrs. King an arduous enterprise. Of course, you may put it that way, was the reply, but seriously, I once threw over a most charming girl on learning quite accidentally that she had suffered amputation of a toe. My conduct was brutal, if you like, but if I had married that girl, I should have been miserable for life and should have made her so.
Wait, is that an episode? Is it an episode of Friends or How I Met Your Mother?
Where she's missing a leg?
Yeah.
It's Friends. It's the girl that Joey's dating.
Yeah, and he, like, can't get over it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Okay.
Whereas, said Sancher with a light laugh, by marrying a gentleman of more liberal view, she escaped with a parted throat.
What?
Oh, I assume she got away by just, like, she cried.
Oh, got it.
Parted throat. That'd be my, yeah.
Yeah, I hope he didn't slice her throat open because she didn't have a toe. What rude.
Oh, no. She married Manton, and he killed her. He slit her throat.
Oh, fuck! So it's King's fault because he left her to marry Crazy Man. Okay.
Ah, you know to whom I refer. Yes, she married Manton, but I don't know about his liberality. But I don't know about his liberality. I'm not sure, but he cut her throat because he discovered that she lacked that excellent thing in woman, the middle toe of the right foot.
Yeah, that's a great reason to kill your wife right there. That totally makes it make sense.
Look at that chap, said Rosser in a low voice, his eyes fixed upon the stranger. That chap was obviously listening intently to the conversation.
I mean, it is a weird one.
It's a weird one.
I would be listening too.
Damn his impudence, muttered King. What ought we to do?
Boys, stupid.
That's an easy one, Rosser replied, rising. Sir, he continued, addressing the stranger, I think it would be better if you would remove your chair to the other end of the veranda. The presence of gentlemen is evidently an unfamiliar situation to you. The man sprang to his feet, strode forward with clenched hands, his face white with rage. All were now standing. Sancher stepped between the belligerents. You are hasty and unjust, he said to Rosser. This gentleman has done nothing to deserve such language. But Rosser would not withdraw a word. By the custom of the country and the time, there could be but one outcome to the quarrel. I demand the satisfaction due to a gentleman, said the stranger, who had become more calm. I have not an acquaintance in this region. Perhaps you, sir, bowing to Sancher, will be kind enough to represent me in this matter.
Geez, that escalated quickly.
Well, you know, boys get grumpy.
Boys are stupid.
Sancher accepted the trust somewhat reluctantly, it must be confessed, for the man's appearance and manner were not at all to his liking. King, who during the colloquy, the conversation, I assume, but do you want to look it up?
Colloquy. A conversation, a gathering for discussion. Colloquy.
King, who during the colloquy had hardly removed his eyes from the stranger's face and had not spoken a word, consented with a nod to act for Rosser. And the upshot of it was that the principals having retired, a meeting was arranged for the next evening. The nature of the arrangements has been already disclosed. The duel with knives in a dark room was once a commoner feature of southwestern life than it is likely to be again.
Yeah, it sounds stupid. Let's throw two guys in a dark-ass room with knives and see who wins.
And just see what happens.
Was this some Arya Stark shit? Like, fuck.
How thin a veneering of chivalry covered the essential brutality of the code under which such encounters were possible, we shall see.
Oh, no.
Sunk dunk.
Don't.
We are on
To tres.
to part 3. In the blaze of a midsummer noonday, the old Manton house was hardly true to its traditions. It was of the earth, earthy. The sunshine caressed it warmly and affectionately with evident disregard of its bad reputation. The grass greening all the expanse in its front seemed to grow not rankly, but with a natural and joyous exuberance, and the weeds blossomed quite like plants. Full of charming lights and shadows and populous with pleasant-voiced birds, the neglected shade trees no longer struggled to run away, but bent reverently beneath their burdens of sun and song. Even in the glassless upper windows was an expression of peace and contentment due to the light within. Over the stony fields, the visible heat danced with a lively tremor incompatible with the gravity which is an attribute of the supernatural.
Okay, for a second I thought we'd gone backwards. I thought this was like before the murders, but clearly
No,
it's not.
I think we've pushed
Yeah.
to after the duel,
Yes.
and whatever happened in that room seems to have set things aright.
Seems to have calmed down the house. Let's find out.
Such was the aspect under which the place presented itself to Sheriff Adams and two other men who had come out from Marshall to look at it. One of these men was Mr. King, the sheriff's deputy. The other, whose name was Brewer, was a brother of the late Mrs. Manton.
So Mr. King, that jackass that was like, I can't marry people with no middle toe, is the sheriff's deputy. What a dickwad.
And the other guy is the brother of the woman
who
that
was
he turned
sick, yes.
down and then she got murdered.
Yeah. Yep. Small town living, man.
Yep. Under a beneficent law of the state relating to property which has been for a certain period abandoned by an owner whose residence cannot be ascertained, the sheriff was the legal custodian of the Manton farm and appurtenances.
Ooh. And it is appurtenance. An accessory or other item associated with a particular activity or style of living.
Oh, so all the shit.
Yeah. All the appurtenance of luxurious travel.
Great.
Yes.
The sheriff was the legal custodian of the Manton farm and appurtenances thereunto belonging. His present visit was in mere perfunctory compliance with some order of a court in which Mr. Brewer had an action to get possession of the property as heir to his deceased sister. By a mere coincidence, the visit was made on the day after the night that Deputy King had unlocked the house for another and very different purpose.
Mm-hmm.
His presence now was not of his own choosing. He had been ordered to accompany his superior and at the moment could think of nothing more prudent than simulated alacrity in obedience to the command. He didn't want to be there, but he was faking it.
He didn't want people to know what he had been part of. I'm
Right.
guessing.
Carelessly opening the front door, which to his surprise was not locked, the sheriff was amazed to see lying on the floor of the passage into which it opened a confused heap of men's apparel.
Uh-oh. Orgy house.
What's going on?
It's like,
Listen for
It's the bathhouse for this local community.
Examination showed it to consist of 2 hats and the same number of coats, waistcoats, and scarves, all in a remarkably good state of preservation, albeit somewhat defiled by the dust in which they lay.
That means that both of them are still there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Brewer was equally astonished, but Mr. King's emotion is not of record.
Gee, I wonder why.
With a new and lively interest in his own actions, the sheriff now unlatched and pushed open the door on the right, and the 3 entered. The room was apparently vacant. No. As their eyes became accustomed to the dimmer light, something was visible in the farthest angle of the wall. It was a human figure, that of a man crouching close to the corner. Something in the attitude made the intruders halt when they had barely passed the threshold. The figure more and more clearly defined itself. The man was upon one knee, his back in the angle of the wall, his shoulders elevated to the level of his ears, his hands before his face, palms outward, fingers spread and crooked like claws. The white face turned upward on the retracted neck had an expression of unutterable fright, the mouth half open, the eyes incredibly expanded. He was stone dead.
Holy shit!
Yet, with the exception of the Bowie knife, which had evidently fallen from his own hand, not another object was in the room.
What?
In thick dust that covered the floor were some confused footprints near the door and along the wall through which it opened. Along one of the adjoining walls, too, past the boarded-up windows, was the trail made by the man himself in reaching his corner. Instinctively, in approaching the body, the three men followed that trail. The sheriff grasped one of the out-thrown arms. It was as rigid as iron, and the application of a gentle force rocked the entire body without altering the relation of its parts. Brewer, pale with excitement, gazed intently into the distorted face. "God of mercy," he suddenly cried. "It is Manton!"
What?
"You are right," said King, with an evident attempt at calmness. "I knew Manton. He then wore a full beard, and his hair long, but this is he." He might have added, "I recognized him when he challenged Rosser. I told Rosser and Sancher who he was before we played him this horrible trick, when Rosser left this dark room at our heels, forgetting his outer clothing in the excitement and driving away with us in his shirt sleeves. All through the discreditable proceedings, we knew with whom we were dealing, murderer and coward that he was."
Wow.
But nothing of this did Mr. King say. He kept it to himself.
He didn't want, yeah.
With his better light, he was trying to penetrate the mystery of the man's death. That he had not once moved from the corner where he had been stationed, that his posture was that of neither attack nor defense, that he had dropped his weapon, that he had obviously perished of sheer horror of something that he saw. These were circumstances which Mr. King's disturbed intelligence could not rightly comprehend.
So they were just going to lock him in the house that he killed her in and
see what
get
happened.
the fuck out,
Yeah.
but something else killed him.
Groping in intellectual darkness for a clue to his maze of doubt, his gaze, directed mechanically downward in a way of one who ponders momentous matters, fell upon something which there, in the light of day and in the presence of living companions, affected him with terror. In the dust of years that lay thick upon the floor, leading from the door by which they had entered straight across the room to within a yard of Manton's crouching corpse, were 3 parallel lines of footprints.
Oh, fuck.
Light, but definite impressions of bare feet. The outer ones, those of small children, the inner a woman's.
Oh, no, no.
From the point at which they ended, they did not return. They pointed all one way. Brewer, who had observed them at the same moment, was leaning forward in an attitude of rapt attention, horribly pale. "Look at that," he cried, pointing with both hands at the nearest print of the woman's right foot, where she had apparently stopped and stood. "The middle toe is missing." It was Gertrude. Gertrude was the late Mrs. Manton, sister to Mr. Brewer. The end.
Ew!
tale of revenge from the afterlife.
A tale of revenge of the four-toed woman. Oh, that's icky. Oh, I like it.
Spookular.
I like that these guys were just being dicks to this guy who clearly was a horrible person.
Right.
So, yeah.
They recognized him. They knew. Yeah.
They knew. So they were just going to, like, play a prank on him by, like, locking him in his old house and, you know, leaving him there and just, like, abandoning him. So eventually, hopefully, someone would pick him up and he'd have to pay for his crimes. But he paid for his crimes because his wife and kids were still waiting there for him.
Or alternatively, this house is well known to be haunted. Did they know? Or did they hope?
I mean, they knew it was...
They figured, let's lock him in this house with the ghost of his murdered wife and children. And who the fuck cares?
And the next day, the house, like... Well, and it's funny that her brother wanted to go the next day. Like, it's like he knew. He knew that they were done with the house.
It sounds like this was a prearranged thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just really cool. That was good.
It's a fun story.
I liked how it, like, jumped around and then, like, ew. Like,
yeah. Good. So good use of language, good use of imagery, and time jumping that made it feel a little bit like a Lost episode.
Yes. Truly. All right. I knew this was a ghost story, and we had not read a, like, true ghost story from Mr. Bierce. Like,
right.
They were all, like, kind of war stories. And so I was like, ooh, I want to hear this kind of writing from him. And did not let us down. Yay, Mr. Bierce, wherever you may be.
Yeah, that was cool. So, hey, listeners, what did you think of that one? Did you enjoy a return to Ambrose Bierce? Did you like that we got back to some ghost storying?
Spooky campfire stories.
How, where along the lines did you figure out what was going on?
Yeah.
Inquiring minds want to know. Shoot us a message. Let us know your thoughts. Give us recommendations for other stories if you have them. Please do reach out. Tell us how you're feeling. I don't know. Whatever else you got.
Yeah.
We just like hearing from you.
Chit-chatting with our people who like our ridiculous stupidness.
Yeah. And go ahead and when you reach out to us on either email at 5050artsproduction@gmail.com or any of the social medias, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, using Campfire Classics Podcast. Use this week's secret passcode, which is Opinionated Cranks.
Opinionated Cranks. Ain't that the truth in the world right now?
That's everything I got.
Yeah.
I want to hear what y'all think.
I liked it. I like ghost stories.
Yay. Anything for you before we sign off?
No, I'm good.
Great. Well, then, thank you for tuning in. And until next week, this has been Campfire Classics, where we try to read those books that look really good on your shelf.
Just because I ain't got my middle toe don't make me a hoe. I'm gonna fuck you up. Woo!